To join us. Today we have Mr. Paul Rucker, who is the Director of Alumni Relations. And Paul actually has been in Kobe many times through the Edmonds Community College when he was working there, and come to find out today was there with Shannon in 1996. Right? So it's kind of a small world. And also Kyle Funakoshi, who is the Senior Manager for Volunteer Programs at the UW Alumni Association. Kyle's a Jet himself, was in Fukuoka, and there's also former president of the Seattle or Washington? Seattle Japan American Citizens League. So we're very honored to have the both of them today, and we're excited to find out how we can parallel a lot with our alumni organization and learn from theirs and how they deal with theirs. So thank you very much. Paul? Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ryan. It's a pleasure to be here. Can everybody hear me okay in the back? Well, welcome to Seattle. It's great to have everyone here. Certainly close to the University of Washington is always fun for us and fun for individuals to come to Seattle. The rain has been a little bit strange the last couple of days, but hopefully the weather will turn this weekend. Let me share with you a little bit about what we're going to talk about for the next, hopefully, 30 to 35 minutes, and then I really want to encourage questions from you and some interactivity in this session of the workshop. When Kyle and Ryan approached me and suggested that there may be some parallels with what has been happening across the United States with alumni associations at universities and colleges to some of the challenges and opportunities that you're facing with the JETAA Alumni Association. My background in international education and the programs that I used to work with and study abroad and overseas instruction and international students, I think there really are some interesting similarities for you to consider when you're looking at the structure, when you look at the opportunities, the idea of having chapters and multiple countries and 50,000 plus JET alums, and all of the different challenges that you face really mirror the challenges that public universities and private universities have had as they think about their alumni and their interests and their needs and their structures and their agendas and their political environments across the nation. I thought we could draw some connections to those, and I wanted to share with you what seems to be the prevailing wisdom and the literature and the experiences that university alumni associations are working through these past 10 years, and draw some connections to what's happening with Claire, what you're thinking about with your chapters, and how this framework may provide a toolkit for you to think about future opportunities as you grapple with many of the same issues that we in universities are dealing with ourselves. So the issues are very common. We know what we are. We've got a parent organization. I, at the University of Washington, Assistant VP for Constituent Relations, Director of the Alumni Association, 300,000 alums all across the world, 55,000 dues-paying members. How is it that we create a consensus that the interests and the values and the goals of our Alumni Association both work for the alums, but also map to the values and the goals of Claire and JET, in my case, the university, the administration, and our role as a public higher ed institution? One of the things that we've found in alumni associations across the nation in the last 15 years is, up until about 10 or 15 years ago, the actual reason for having an active alumni effort has been very undefined. You have these wonderful universities, you have these wonderful organizations like JET, you have individuals across the world, across the nation, that have this tremendous emotional affinity, this active experience. They return from their experience, they graduate from their university, they come back to their former lives, they return from overseas, they decide that they want to congregate and build fellowship and have community. How do they sustain those efforts? What is it that brings people together with a common understanding of the why? And then the question is the how. So what I want to talk a little bit about is this framework that we've developed at the university, but also that universities have been experimenting with across the nation. Kyle's going to talk a little bit about how that transfers into a volunteer network, which is essentially what you guys are trying to do. And then how is it that your parent organization, your host organization, Claire in this case, what role do they have in terms of defining their agendas and their needs? How does that all mix together to form something that everybody agrees is where you want to be and where you want to go in the future? So in the university system, what we found was in the private schools, the role of alumni was always very clear. give money. For those of you that are privately educated, you're familiar with that, and private schools did a great job with that. If anyone at the Ivy League schools or other private schools, from the moment you decide that you're going to attend that school, not just are they charging you tuition, but your parents are being solicited, you're being solicited, you've got class giving, you've got all those other structures that look at philanthropy. Public universities were very late to that game. In the 1960s and 1970s, when higher ed funding started to change and public university budgets outgrew their expenses and their cost structures, all of a sudden alumni from private universities were looked to as a resource. Prior to that, alumni were the boosters or the cheer people or the folks that maintained tradition. They didn't really have relevance to the life of the university. So that term relevance and alignment are terms that we're going to come back to quite a bit, because that's really what's happened when we think about alumni associations. When we think about the role of alumni serving a purposeful need in the life of the organization that you're supporting. That effort at the University of Washington, at major public universities, as I said, started coming together in the 1970s. When fundraising started to be an issue, alumni associations had been around for 100+ years at many of these locations. Universities had to go out to these alumni associations and go out to alums and say, now we haven't really talked to you in a long time, and we haven't really given you a lot of love, but now we need you to do something for us. And so this great negotiation took place, and alumni chapters and alumni associations and key volunteers who've been out there doing their own thing for a number of years all of a sudden had to sit down with the university administrations and find out, well, what it is that you really need from us. And then all of a sudden there's a financial relationship. And all of a sudden the university says, well, we'll create a budget to support your efforts if the work that you do supports things that we're interested in. And then the alumni associations say, well, we have a membership program with dues-paying members. That's how we make our money to do the operations that we value. But then when they started looking at their bottom lines, they realized, well, you know what? Membership organizations are challenging. Membership fulfillment, the membership psychology, people that join membership associations, the literature all tells us that those are very challenging structures to maintain. So all of a sudden the alumni associations started thinking, well, maybe if we had membership revenue and we had institutional support from the university, maybe we could pool the two of those together and continue to do what we're doing because we're interested in what we're doing. And the university said, well, but what we're really interested in you doing as an alumni association is helping us to recruit new students, helping us to be advocates for the vitality, for the integrity, for the excellence of the university. We need alums to be ambassadors. And you know what? We also need alums to serve as career services reps, as mentors, as a network. For those of you that were privately educated, the network in private universities is so strong. If any of you went to the Ivy League schools, you know what that means. We were talking about how in Tokyo the private schools have such strong alumni networks where there's networking nights and all sorts of different programming for alums of these universities over in Japan. But there's very little of that programming for large public universities that have had decentralized or disparate alumni groups. So what we started thinking about was, if we brought those together, if we could articulate a common vision, if we could agree on what is it that the university needs, what is it that the alums think they need, if we can find a common ground, pool those resources, have a sustainable volunteer structure, have consistent communication, have good technology to manage all the communications and the membership and all of the rest of the infrastructure, all of a sudden you have a foundation that you can begin to build with. So when Ryan and Kyle and I had lunch the other day, we were talking about where the JETAA Alumni Association is and the different chapters that you have and the volunteer structures that you manage and the different social responsibility programs that many of you are involved with. And I was told about how many of your groups are looking at those same challenges that alumni associations have. Well, how do we make this sustainable? How do we define roles? How do we really understand what Claire's interests are? And how do we incorporate Claire's interest into our mission statements? How do we communicate to returning JET participants that this is a value for them? And who ties it all together? Is it an annual conference like this that clarifies it? Is it leadership in your respective chapters that clarifies it? So many of those opportunities that Ryan was describing really resonated with me. And it got me thinking about how delicate of a conversation this oftentimes is. Because when you're working with volunteers, you're competing for people's time. Certainly there's an emotional connection, we hope. Certainly there's an advocacy and an affinity that your past participants would have for the endeavor